Ryan Murphy here along with Jeremy Fowler with Pioneer Press, getting ready for week 2 in Indianapolis. Vikings off a stirring 26-23.
Ugly at times.
Very ugly at times, but probably very gratifying when you get off to a start like that. 1-0. Colts coming off a tough loss in Chicago and their rookie quarterback Andrew Luck. Vikings, this could be an opportunity to be 2-0 and probably at least gain a little more confidence heading into a tougher portion of their schedule. How do you see things lining up and where they are heading into the Colts game at Lucas Oil Field?
Sure. Well, what's interesting about the NFL, a lot of times the stars need to align for you. You got to get some lucky breaks. Vikings are fully healthy right now for the most part. Every impact player is ready to play in practice. They're out there in the field right now in the cold rain. Last week Jacksonville was missing 2 key defensive starters, which helped the offense. This week, apparently, Mike Freeney, one of the best defensive ends in the league, is not going to be playing. He has a high ankle sprain, according to some reports. So that's a break for Matt Khalil on that side. Yeah. So the stars are aligning a little bit. They could realistically be 2-0 going into San Francisco next week. That's going to be a really arduous task trying to play San Fran, one of the best teams in the league. But for the most part, they're well positioned at this point.
And defensively, they were able to get away with a few things. They were able to come up with some key stops at the end against Jacksonville. Pretty leaky in the first half. Gave up a lot of first downs. Gave up huge chunks of time of possession. They're looking. They got some pressure on Blaine Gabbert. Made him do some things he didn't want to do. Andrew Luck's going to be trying to make a statement coming into his first NFL home game in Indianapolis, #1 overall pick, taking over for Peyton Manning. All of that's going to be weighing on him. 3 interceptions, 3 sacks last week. He did throw for 300 yards, but it was a tough opening week for him. And the Indianapolis's offensive line is pretty banged up too. So I think the Vikings are going to be licking their chops at least on the defensive line.
Right. I don't care if this guy's a rookie or not. Coming up a 3 interception game in his opener, considering what his legacy is supposed to be over time, I think he's going to have something to prove this week. The Vikings could have their hand pulled up. But how about this? For all the knocking we did on the Vikings last year for their lack of second half adjustments, last week they looked like a lot better defensively in the second half. They were deflecting a lot of passes. They seemed to make adjustments. Jacksonville wasn't as effective in the running game in the second half.
Right.
So credit to Frazier and his staff for mixing it up a little bit. We'll see. They feel like they have more weapons in the secondary where they can blitz and be a little more creative. And we'll see if that reigns true against Indianapolis to see what they do after halftime.
And they're going to try to rattle. Obviously, Luck is a talented player, but he is still a rookie quarterback, and he was put on the ground a lot in Chicago. So getting after him early and often would probably maybe rattle him a little bit too.
Yeah.
Offensively, the Vikings had a pretty balanced attack against Jacksonville. Obviously, Peterson was the huge storyline coming back from his knee injury, 84 yards, cutting, looking fine, scoring. They were able to make some plays in the passing game, especially later. Ponder was able to get some things done, but where do you see that shaking out? Where do you see sort of that 2 tight end formation playing out here? Is that something that we're going to be able to see? Is John Carlson going to be a part of this, or is he still working his way back?
I think he's working his way back. He only had, I think, 18 snaps last week. It was clear that they were being cautious with him, but it's a good sign for Ponder in this offense if without Jerome Simpson and to a lesser extent without John Carlson last week being limited, only got 1 target in the passing game and it didn't complete a pass. So they were still able to move the ball, and they can still get more creative if they get those 2 tight end sets. I know offensive coordinator Bill Musgrave wants to use those guys in different ways and mix it up. I don't know if they're going to really be able to channel the Patriots what they do with 2 tight ends, but I think that's the model that they want to try to follow a little bit. And obviously, Kyle Rudolph showed that he can do last week, so they can get creative a little bit. But here's a key stat for me last week that I think was the biggest difference: 106. That's the combined yardage for Michael Jenkins, Devin Aromas to do those backup receivers behind Percy. They don't have to be game changers, but they have to give them just enough to be able to work with and create some separation, so Percy can't be double teamed all the time.
I mean, give the the illusion of a threat that there might be a way to make some plays. Possession guys that can at least keep the chains moving, keep some drives alive.
Absolutely.
So the Vikings have a pretty good chance to open the season 2-0. Probably the best chance they're going to have to stay undefeated at this point, because as Jeremy mentioned, they got San Francisco coming in on week 3, and then they have to go to Detroit for week 4. So I think there's an opportunity here to gain a lot of confidence, keep the momentum going, and maybe define some things early in the year.
This team is interesting. I mean, they have a chance. Last year we couldn't really say that. It imploded after that 0-4 start, and it was a fragile team last year. We could see the fragility of the league when you don't start well. They start 2-0, and that's huge. I don't care if you win against San Fran in week 3 or not, but just have some kind of positive momentum.
Just another side note: Blair Walsh, kicker, was named NFC's Special Teams Player of the Week. Rookie, obviously, his 55-yard field goal to force overtime and his 38-yarder to win it, part of a 4-for-4 day. probably an early candidate for Vikings MVP at this point.
He's the star of the team right now.
He is right now.
Yeah.
All right, well, so we'll be checking in after we get back from Indianapolis, previewing the 49ers game for Jeremy Fowler, Brian Murphy signing off at Winter Park.